Welcome back, life science learners, to our final segment. In this segment, we're going to look at the development of precocial and altricial strategies as part of reproduction in vertebrates. Let's try and understand what do we mean by precocial and altricial development. When we look at this, we refer to essentially the development before birth or hatching. So the amount of development that occurs either before, pre, or after birth is essentially what we're looking at. And that's significant in trying to understand the survival of a species. And so these techniques or these strategies offer different successes in terms of species or animals surviving. So precocial and altricial are terms that describe the extent of development of the embryo when it is hatched or born. So these two development strategies occur mainly in birds and mammals and are related to the environment. So depending on the environment in which they survive, the degree of development either before birth or after birth is significant in terms of their survival in their environment. And this relates to the amount of food available, so the food supply to the developing embryo and offspring, as well as the protection against predators. And so we will find that this often determines the success of animals in terms of the danger that they may face post hatching or being born. And so let's try and unpack this behavior in terms of a strategy for increasing their chances of surviving. Right, so let's unpack precocial development. So precocial development refers to species where the young are fully developed and immediately mobile when they are hatched or born. So generally we find that the young, once they hatch, are able to, after a little while, stand up, run, or even be able to respond by themselves. And this links to a lot of the development that happens during the development of the young internally or in the egg. So generally, fewer offsprings are produced when we refer to precocial development, as individuals has to develop relatively advanced stages before being born or hatched. So we'll find that in precocial development, because of the extent of development that is within the parent, internally or in the egg, there are generally fewer offsprings that are produced because they require lots of energy during their development, or even those eggs that are produced have a lot of energy and require fewer eggs to be able to sustain the development of the young in their eggs. In precocial animals, most of the energy is expended on prenatal development. Essentially, prenatal development is the development before being born or hatched. You'll find that the mothers are far less involved after the young are born or hatched. So essentially we find that in precocial development, there's a lot of development that happens prenatally. Essentially, when the young are developing inside the uterus of the mother or inside the egg, they develop fully to a point that when they are born, they are capable of surviving, often independently, by themselves. So we find that the parents offer very little parental care post-development. So lots of prenatal energy required, but postnatal energy is very little energy from the parents. So this is a display in birds on the ground, such as your chickens, ducks, geese, guinea fowls, and your ostriches. So you'll find that often birds that lay eggs terrestrially on the ground have an extensive period of the egg developing within the embryo developing within the egg. And that means that when these hatch, you'll find that the hatchlings are able to survive. So the incubation time is usually long so that the young can develop completely before being hatched. These eggs have to contain large amounts of yolk and albumin, which is a suitable and sufficient food reserve for an extended incubation period. Once they hatch, you'll find that the chick eggs eyes are often open directly after hatching. So you'll find that an extensive incubation period occurs. There's significant development of hair or fur or feathers rather, and these, when they hatch, their eyes open quite soon after, and they're able to respond and actually survive immediately without having parental care. Right. So you'll find that the chicken's bodies are covered with downy feathers, and these are the feathers that keep them warm, and soon after development these feathers are replaced by adult feathers. Many chicks, however, cannot regulate their own temperature, and they rely on their parents' body heat. So you'll find that often the parents will be around them to offer some amount of parental care in terms of heat that allows the chicks to develop. The chicks are immediately active and leave the nest soon after hatching. The chicks can often, with the help of the parents, find food on their own. And that's an important part of many of our terrestrial birds that lay their eggs on the ground, is that the chicks can attempt to survive by themselves. The chicks attempt to protect themselves by either lying low or camouflage, or remaining motionless on the ground, and in this way they're able to survive from predators. One of the challenges of being kind of hatching on the ground is that these eggs are exposed to predators. So soon after hatching, these chicks instinctively pick up the behavior of being able to respond to threats, and their threat is either moving into an area that camouflages them or lying motionless or flat on the ground so that they are not seen or as probable prey by the predators. So if we continue with precocial development in mammals, there are mammals that display this as well. These are seen in most ungulates, and these are your hooved animals such as sheep, antelope, giraffes, zebra, wildebeest, rhinos, and the hippos as well. And you'll find that these mammals show a gestation period, or the development of the young, being sufficiently long, and this allows for enough time for the young to develop fully and reach development completely within the uterus. The embryo or the fetus receives nutrients from the placenta during the gestational period. The eyes of the young open directly after birth, and the young are covered in hair. So you'll find that in mammals there's an extensive incubation period. The young develop maximum in terms of their body covering and skin and the ability to survive once born. And so soon after they are born, you'll find that their body is covered and they have a significant independence when compared to other species. So the young are immediately active. They can stand and start walking within a few hours of birth. And this is often a strategy in your hooved animals to be able to avoid predation. So one of the challenges in the environments that they face is that predators are constantly looking for young, weak individuals. So being able to survive, being able to move immediately after being born is a successful strategy in terms of survival. We also find that the young can feed themselves and drink milk from the mother. The young can attempt to protect themselves by either doing the same as what birds do, so remaining camouflaged, they can lie flat or motionless, or they basically run away from their predators because they're able to live actively soon after being born. Okay, and so here is a beautiful image of giraffes and their little calves that actually are capable of moving and being mobile and independent soon after being born. Okay, let's move on to altricial development and focus on the word al meaning after, and I often refer to this where the species, in the species where the young are not fully developed and cannot move around immediately after being born or hatched. So there's a lot of development that happens after they are born. So they're born often with very limited movement or the ability to survive independently. And so lots of their development happens postnatal. So let's try and unpack that. So in general, these more offsprings are produced, and you'll find that the young are born or hatched at an early stage. Altricial animals spend most of their energy on postnatal development, so after birth. The parents are involved in feeding the young and protecting them against predators for a long time after birth. If we compare these to our precocial development in birds, you'll find that in birds that are altricial, these birds are nesting above the ground. When we compare that to precocial, these were birds that were nesting on the ground. So we find that these are Examples are the doves, the weaver birds, your eagles, as well as your falcons. So these perch high up in trees away from predators, because when these young hatch, they spend extensive periods of time in their nest, depending on their parents to bring them food. And so as a young developing chick, their safety depends on being isolated in an area where predators cannot easily access them. So you'll find that the incubation periods are much shorter when we compare that to your precocial birds. You'll find that they also spend lots of their time in their nest developing after hatching, and this is to provide protection against predators. The young hatch as soon as possible, and they don't have that extensive period of development in the egg. The eggs are smaller than those of the precocial species, and they contain little yolk. So if we compare that ostrich egg, significantly large, lots of energy in it, and so you'll find that the egg in the ostrich, the young embryo develops as fully possible, so that when they hatch, they are able to survive and immediately be active. However, if we compare that to birds like a dove egg, relatively small, and that means that the dove or the weavers or even your falcons and your eagles, those eggs require lots of support once the young develop, and so that development happens after they are hatched. Okay, so you'll find that in altricial development, the chick's eyes are often still closed after hatching. The chicks have naked bodies without any down feathers on them, so that you'll find that their bodies haven't developed fully in the eggs, so their eyes are still closed, their bodies are exposed, and so it means that they often require their parents to be able to keep them warm. So the chicks cannot regulate their body temperature and are still dependent on their parents' body heat. You'll find that the chicks cannot walk very far or even fly, and so they are bound to that nest during the initial few days or weeks after development. And so the chicks remain in their nest for a long period of time and are totally dependent on their parents for food. And here's a classic image of the young. You'll find that the eyes are closed, you find that the body has no covering, and so they have exposed body surfaces. The eyes, they rely on their parents. The nest often is provided with feathers or structures that allow them to stay warm and to stay hydrated and fed. So if we compare these strategies amongst different species, we'll find that precocial development and altricial development are two strategies that allow for successful development, each having their own sets of challenges in terms of the young surviving. However, we need to recognize that at the end, every species that exists today is successful because of their own unique reproductive strategies. So if you were to ask me, would the birds that live on the ground have been more successful if they had changed from a precocial to an altricial? The answer would be actually no, because each species has adapted to their unique strategies in terms of increasing their chances of survival. So reproductive strategies are unique to each species, and we've looked at animals today and we've compared them and how they successfully survive using each of the unique reproductive strategies, from parental care to the development of the young within the egg in terms of the structure of the egg, to in fact the nurturing of parental care post the development of the young. Guys, you've been a great audience. As we wrap this section up, I wish you well, see you soon, take care, and have a baie lekker day.